He thought he was stopping a tired woman from entering the building that rainy night, but he had no idea he was locking out the most powerful person in the entire tower. Rainwater shimmered across the marble sidewalk outside Carter Heights as Evelyn Carter stepped out of the black cab with a small leather suitcase in one hand, and her phone pressed against her ear in the other. Manhattan glowed behind her in blurred gold reflections, taxi lights smearing across the wet streets while cold November wind curled around the steel towers above. At 38, Evelyn carried herself with the calm composure of someone who had spent years inside boardrooms where billion-dollar decisions were made in whispers instead of raised voices. Yet tonight, dressed in a cream wool sweater beneath a long beige coat, her blonde hair loosely tied after 16 exhausting hours of international travel, she looked less like a corporate executive and more like an ordinary woman trying to get home before midnight. "We'll finalize Singapore on Monday," she said quietly into the phone as she climbed the building steps. "No announcements until I review the contracts myself." Her assistant spoke nervously through the speaker, but Evelyn's attention drifted toward the lobby ahead. Something felt different. The warm gold lighting inside Carter Heights usually carried a quiet familiarity, the kind that greeted long-term residents with subtle luxury and practiced discretion. Tonight the lobby felt colder somehow, sharper, like a room pretending to smile. Before Evelyn could reach the glass doors, a tall man in a dark doorman uniform stepped directly into her path. "Ma'am," he said firmly, holding one gloved hand out. "Residents only." Evelyn lowered her phone slowly. For a moment, she simply stared at him through the rain. "I am a resident," she answered calmly. The doorman didn't move. His nameplate read Vincent Hale, polished perfectly beneath the lobby lights. He looked to be in his early 30s, clean-cut, posture stiff with the confidence of someone newly trusted with authority. His eyes dropped briefly toward her damp suitcase and simple coat before returning to her face with professional skepticism. "I'm sorry," he said, though he didn't sound sorry at all. "I don't recognize you." Behind the glass doors, several residents lingered near the elevators, their quiet conversations fading as they noticed the exchange outside. Evelyn could feel their eyes drifting toward her now, curious but detached, the way wealthy people often watch discomfort from a safe distance. She slipped her phone into her coat pocket. "I've lived here for 11 years. Vincent gave a small nod that suggested he had already decided otherwise. "Then you should know we've updated building security policies." His tone sharpened slightly. "Can I see identification?" Rain tapped softly against the steel awning overhead. Evelyn studied him carefully. She had traveled across 3 countries in 4 days, negotiated a merger worth nearly $400 million, and spent the last 14 hours moving through airports and black SUVs and private terminals. Yet somehow, standing outside her own building in wet shoes beneath the Manhattan rain, this stranger was speaking to her like she didn't belong there at all. A hush settled over the lobby. One older resident near the concierge desk leaned subtly closer to watch. Vincent reached inside the podium beside the door and removed a small black box along with a sealed envelope. Then he held them out toward Evelyn with controlled formality. "The board asked me to give you these," he said, "if you ever came back." For the first time that night, Evelyn's expression changed. Just slightly. Enough for Vincent to notice. Enough for the room behind him to grow completely silent. Evelyn looked down at the small black box resting in Vincent Hale's gloved hands while rainwater slid quietly from the edge of the awning above them. For several seconds, neither of them moved. The city noise behind her faded beneath the strange heaviness settling over the entrance of Carter Heights. Inside the lobby, conversations had completely stopped. Even the piano music drifting softly through the marble hallways seemed distant now, drowned beneath the tension gathering in the air. Vincent cleared his throat carefully. "I was instructed to hand this directly to you," he said. Evelyn slowly accepted the box first. It felt lighter than she expected. Cold, expensive, deliberate. Then she took the envelope. Her name was typed across the front in clean silver lettering. Not handwritten. Typed. That detail alone made something tighten quietly in her chest. Carter Heights had never communicated with her formally. Not in 11 years. Not after she and Noah had practically rebuilt the property from bankruptcy into one of the most exclusive residential towers in Manhattan. She slid one finger beneath the envelope seal while Vincent watched her with measured caution. He was trying to remain professional, but she could already see uncertainty beginning to creep into his expression. The problem with judging people too quickly, Evelyn thought, was that instinct often arrived before understanding did. The envelope opened smoothly. Inside were 3 folded documents clipped together with a silver binder. Evelyn unfolded the first page beneath the glow of the entrance lights. Her eyes scanned the heading once. Then again. Notice of temporary residency suspension. Her face remained calm, but her pulse slowed noticeably. The document claimed that her penthouse access privileges had been suspended pending verification of ownership interests and executive residency compliance. Beneath the statement sat the electronic signatures of 3 board members she recognized immediately. Harold Bennett, Stephen Grayson, Alicia Valli. Evelyn's gaze lingered on the final signature line. Noah Carter. A silence settled deeper around her. Noah would never sign this. Not without calling her first. Not without discussing it privately. Not without personally walking into that boardroom himself and tearing the proposal apart before it ever reached paper. Slowly, Evelyn unfolded the second document. This one was worse. It outlined a temporary transfer of executive authority regarding Carter Heights Holdings while senior ownership remained overseas during restructuring discussions. Restructuring. The word itself felt poisonous. Carefully chosen. Corporate. Sanitized. The kind of word people used when they wanted to steal something quietly. Enough that nobody screamed until it was already gone. A cold realization began moving through her thoughts with terrifying precision. This was not confusion. This was preparation. Someone had expected her to return eventually. Someone had already prepared the narrative before she walked through the door tonight. Vincent shifted awkwardly beside her. "Ma'am, I only started here 2 months ago," he said carefully. "I do not know the details. I was just told there might be an issue with a former resident attempting to access the building." Former resident. There it was again. Evelyn finally lifted her eyes toward him. "Who told you that?" Vincent hesitated just slightly too long. "Building management." Behind him, the concierge desk suddenly looked very empty. Too empty. Usually, there would be at least 2 attendants working the evening shift. Tonight there was only one nervous young receptionist pretending not to watch them. Evelyn folded the papers slowly and slid them back inside the envelope. Her movements remained graceful, controlled, almost delicate. That calmness unsettled Vincent more than anger would have. Angry people shouted. Calm people thought. "You said there was something else," Evelyn said quietly. Vincent nodded and gestured toward the black box in her hand. "I was told to return your access key personally." The rain intensified outside, rattling softly against the glass walls of the tower. Evelyn opened the box carefully. Resting inside on black velvet sat a silver penthouse key card with a thin red line burned across the center. Deactivated. Deliberately revoked. For the first time that evening, several residents inside the lobby exchanged visibly uncomfortable glances. One older woman near the elevators recognized the card immediately. Evelyn noticed the moment recognition flashed across her face. Then came the whispering. Quiet. Sharp. Dangerous. Vincent straightened his posture again, trying to regain control of the situation. "Ma'am, until ownership verification is completed, I cannot permit entry without authorization." Evelyn stared at the ruined key card for another second before closing the box again. Then she surprised him completely. She smiled. Not warmly. Not cruelly. Just enough to make Vincent suddenly aware that he might be standing inside a conversation far larger than he understood. "You are new here," she said softly, "so I will give you one piece of advice." Vincent swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." Evelyn stepped slightly closer beneath the golden lobby lights, her voice calm enough to silence the room behind the glass doors. Never help powerful people erase someone unless you know exactly why they are afraid of them. Vincent froze. Somewhere high above them, an elevator bell chimed softly through the tower. Evelyn reached into her coat pocket and removed her phone again. Then she dialed a number from memory. The call connected almost instantly. "This is Daniel Mercer." Evelyn kept her eyes on the glowing penthouse windows nearly 50 stories above the street. "Daniel," she said quietly, "activate Article 7. There was silence on the line for exactly 2 seconds. Then Daniel answered with sudden urgency. "Mrs. Carter, are you back in New York?" Evelyn's expression never changed. "Apparently," she said while the lobby lights reflected sharply across the rain outside. "Someone hoped I would not be." The moment Evelyn ended the call, something invisible began moving through Carter Heights like electricity before a storm. Vincent could not explain it, but the atmosphere inside the lobby shifted almost immediately. The young receptionist behind the concierge desk glanced suddenly at her computer monitor, her expression draining of color as multiple notifications began flashing across the screen one after another. Somewhere deeper inside the building, elevator systems chimed in rapid succession, then stopped completely. The entire lobby felt unnaturally quiet. Evelyn stood perfectly still beneath the warm gold lights while rain slid down the glass walls behind her. She looked less like someone locked out of her home now, and more like someone patiently observing damage before deciding how much of it needed to be removed. Vincent adjusted his gloves uneasily. "Ma'am," he said cautiously, "if this situation is a misunderstanding, I am sure management can clarify things in the morning." Evelyn looked at him calmly. People who attempt something like this never want morning to arrive. The words landed softly, but Vincent felt them anyway. Across the lobby, 2 residents stepped away from the elevators, pretending not to stare while very obviously listening. One of them, a silver-haired man named Arthur Levinson, had lived in the tower nearly as long as Evelyn herself. His eyes narrowed carefully as recognition finally surfaced. He glanced from Evelyn to the deactivated penthouse key card in her hand, and then toward the empty management office near the back hallway. Suddenly, his face tightened with concern. "Miss Carter," he said quietly from inside the lobby. Vincent blinked. Evelyn turned slightly toward the older man and gave a small polite nod. Arthur's expression changed immediately. Confusion first, then disbelief. Finally, something very close to alarm. "Good Lord," he whispered under his breath. Vincent looked between them. "You know her?" Arthur stared at him as though the question itself was dangerous. "Young man," he said carefully, "do you have any idea who you are standing in front of right now?" Vincent's posture stiffened. Before he could answer, the receptionist behind the concierge desk suddenly stood up so fast her chair rolled backward into the wall. "Sir," she called nervously toward Vincent, "the system just locked management access." Vincent frowned. "What?" "All executive permissions were frozen remotely 30 seconds ago." Her voice trembled now. "Including building administration." A cold silence spread through the marble lobby. Evelyn slipped her phone calmly back into her coat pocket. "That would be Article 7, she said softly. Vincent stared at her. "What is Article 7? Arthur Levinson answered before Evelyn could. "Emergency Founder Protection Authority." His face had gone pale beneath the lobby lights. "It only activates if a founding owner believes corporate control is being compromised internally." Vincent's stomach tightened instantly. Founder. The word echoed louder in his head than anything else that night. He looked back at Evelyn again, truly looking at her for the first time since she arrived. The simple coat, the quiet voice, the complete absence of panic. Suddenly none of it felt ordinary anymore. The rain outside intensified, streaking silver against the towering windows while distant thunder rolled somewhere over the Hudson River. Then the front doors opened behind Evelyn. 3 men in dark overcoats entered quickly from the street carrying leather portfolios and security badges clipped beneath their jackets. The moment they saw Evelyn, all 3 stopped immediately. "Mrs. Carter," the oldest one said with visible urgency. "We came as fast as we could." Vincent's face lost color. Evelyn handed the envelope silently to the man, who began scanning the documents beneath the lobby lights. His jaw tightened more with every page. "They actually filed it," he muttered in disbelief. "Without your authorization." Evelyn's eyes lifted slowly toward the glowing penthouse windows high above the city skyline. "No," she said quietly while the room listened in complete silence. "They filed it because they thought I would stay gone." Vincent Hale had spent years believing wealthy people always announced themselves loudly. Expensive watches, chauffeurs, security details, sharp voices that expected obedience before speaking. But the woman standing beneath the chandelier light of Carter Heights carried none of those things, and somehow that frightened him more. The three attorneys moved quickly across the marble lobby, while the rainstorm outside deepened into sheets of silver against the glass tower. Residents who had originally lingered out of curiosity were no longer pretending not to watch. The atmosphere had changed completely now. This was no longer an awkward misunderstanding at the entrance of a luxury building. This was the moment people realized they might be witnessing the collapse of something powerful from the inside. The oldest attorney handed the forged documents back to Evelyn carefully, almost respectfully. "Mrs. Carter," he said in a lower voice, "we confirmed it on the drive over. Someone initiated a silent restructuring vote 36 hours ago." Evelyn's expression remained unreadable. "Without founder approval?" "Yes." "And Noah," the attorney hesitated. "Your husband's communications were rerouted through executive screening while he was in Tokyo." A quiet murmur spread through the residents nearby. Evelyn looked toward the dark management office again. Empty. Locked. Too quiet. The kind of quiet people create when they think they still have time before consequences arrive. Vincent suddenly felt the weight of every second since she stepped onto the sidewalk. He remembered the way he looked at her suitcase, her coat, her shoes wet from the rain. The assumptions had come automatically, effortlessly. That realization sat heavier in his chest than fear itself. "I did not know," he said quietly. Evelyn finally turned toward him again. "No," she answered calmly. "You did not ask." The words hit harder than anger ever could have. The lobby fell silent once more. Even the receptionist lowered her eyes. Then came the sound that changed everything. The private elevator. Soft. Distinct. Reserved only for executive access and founding ownership. Every head in the lobby turned as the golden elevator doors slowly opened near the back corridor. A tall man stepped out wearing a charcoal overcoat darkened slightly by rain. Noah Carter. His presence altered the room instantly. Not because he raised his voice or demanded attention, but because powerful people around him immediately straightened without thinking. Noah's sharp blue eyes scanned the lobby once before landing on Evelyn standing near the entrance with the deactivated keycard still in her hand. His jaw tightened subtly. "They actually gave it to you," he said quietly. Evelyn held up the black box slightly. "Wrapped beautifully, too." Noah looked toward Vincent next. The young doorman visibly stiffened beneath that calm stare. For several long seconds nobody moved. Then Noah spoke with terrifying composure. "Who authorized my wife to be locked out of her own building?" Somewhere above them, thunder rolled across Manhattan while the lobby of Carter Heights stood frozen in absolute silence. Noah Carter did not raise his voice after asking the question, and somehow that made the silence inside Carter Heights even heavier. The residents near the elevator stood perfectly still beneath the crystal chandeliers while rain hammered softly against the towering windows overlooking Manhattan. Vincent Hale felt every eye in the lobby shift toward him at once. The young doorman opened his mouth slightly, but no words came out. For the first time since Evelyn arrived, the authority he had leaned on all evening no longer felt solid beneath his feet. Noah stepped farther into the lobby, removing his dark leather gloves one finger at a time with slow precision. At 44, he carried the composed stillness of a man who had spent decades negotiating billion-dollar deals without ever needing to appear emotional. His charcoal overcoat still carried droplets of rain from outside, but nothing about him looked rushed or surprised. That was the unsettling part. It was almost as if Noah had expected betrayal eventually. He simply had not expected it to happen tonight. "Who signed the suspension order?" Noah asked again. One of the attorneys beside Evelyn answered quietly. "Harold Bennett initiated the emergency restructuring vote." Noah's jaw tightened faintly. "Without founder consent?" "Yes. Using forged authorization under your wife's name." Another silence followed. Noah looked toward Evelyn, and for a brief moment the tension in his face softened. "You should have called me from the airport." Evelyn folded the envelope calmly against her coat. "I wanted to see how far they would go." Arthur Levinson exhaled slowly beneath his breath. Several residents exchanged uneasy glances. People were beginning to understand now that this was not simply corporate politics. This was personal, deliberate, Someone inside the building had waited for the founders to be separated across different countries before attempting to remove them quietly from their own company. Noah turned his attention toward Vincent again. Who instructed you to stop her? Vincent swallowed hard. Mr. Bennett's office contacted building security this afternoon. Directly? Yes, sir. Noah nodded once, almost thoughtfully. And when my wife told you she lived here? Vincent hesitated. I thought. He stopped himself. The wrong answer had already arrived before he finished speaking. Evelyn saved him from continuing. He thought I looked temporary. Her voice remained calm, but the words settled sharply through the lobby. Vincent lowered his eyes immediately. Noah looked at the deactivated penthouse card in Evelyn's hand, then toward the gathering residents who had witnessed the entire scene unfold from behind polished marble columns and glowing elevator lights. This building was founded on discretion, Noah said quietly, not arrogance. Nobody moved. Even the receptionist behind the concierge desk looked frozen now. One of the attorneys stepped forward carefully. Sir, we also discovered something else during the system lockdown. Noah looked at him. Go on. The restructuring documents were scheduled for final filing at midnight. Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly. Midnight. Less than an hour away. That explained the urgency. If she had arrived tomorrow morning instead of tonight, ownership control might already have been transferred through legal channels complicated enough to bury for months in court. Noah understood immediately too. His expression darkened with cold realization. They were trying to finalize everything before we could respond. Yes, sir. Thunder rolled faintly over the city skyline again, while the private elevator behind Noah chimed softly. Then another sound followed. Footsteps. Several quick, nervous footsteps approaching from the management hallway. Every person in the lobby turned at once as Harold Bennett finally appeared from around the corridor corner wearing an expensive navy suit and an expression that collapsed the instant he saw Evelyn standing beside Noah beneath the chandelier light. He stopped walking immediately. For one brief second, nobody spoke. Harold Bennett had spent the last 12 years building his reputation inside Carter Heights as a polished executive who understood power, image, and timing better than anyone else on the board. But standing there now, watching the founders he thought were safely overseas staring back at him in complete silence, he suddenly looked like a man who realized the room had turned against him before he even entered it. Evelyn studied him calmly. You locked me out of my own home, she said softly. Harold forced a tight smile that fooled absolutely no one. Evelyn, he replied carefully, this is clearly a misunderstanding. Noah's eyes never left him. Then explain the forged signatures. The room went silent again. Harold Bennett forced a smile that looked painfully fragile beneath the chandelier lights of Carter Heights. The polished confidence he normally carried around investors and board meetings had vanished the moment he saw Evelyn standing beside Noah in the lobby. Rain streaked down the towering glass walls behind them while every resident nearby remained frozen in silence, watching the confrontation unfold like something far larger than corporate politics. Harold adjusted the cuff of his navy suit slowly, buying himself a few seconds to think. Noah, he began carefully, there is no reason to escalate this publicly. The board only acted out of concern for operational stability during your extended absence overseas. Noah stared at him without expression. You forged my wife's authorization. Harold exhaled softly. The signatures were temporary placeholders pending final approval. One of the attorneys beside Evelyn immediately spoke. That is not what the filing timestamps show. Harold's eyes flicked toward the legal team. And who exactly authorized external counsel to interfere with internal restructuring? Evelyn answered before anyone else could. I did. Her calm voice cut through the lobby with terrifying precision. Harold looked at her fully now, and for the first time that night something close to panic flashed across his face. Not because she sounded angry, because she did not. Evelyn Carter had built her reputation over 2 decades by remaining calm when everyone else lost control. Investors trusted her because she never reacted emotionally. Competitors feared her because she noticed details long before they realized they had exposed them. Harold understood that better than anyone, which meant he also understood exactly how dangerous her silence truly was. Evelyn, he said carefully, softening his tone, You have been away for nearly 4 months. Communication gaps happened. Decisions needed to be made quickly. So you decided to erase me? She asked quietly. The lobby fell silent again. Harold immediately shook his head. No one erased you. Evelyn slowly held up the deactivated penthouse keycard between 2 fingers. The thin red line burned across its surface reflected beneath the gold chandelier lights. You disabled my access. Then she lifted the envelope containing the forged documents. You suspended my ownership authority. Finally, her eyes settled directly onto Harold's face. And you instructed building security to classify me as a former resident before midnight filings finalized. Harold opened his mouth slightly, but no response came. The precision of her words stripped away every safe excuse before he could use it. Across the lobby, several residents exchanged visibly uncomfortable looks. They were beginning to realize this situation was much worse than they originally assumed. This was not a disagreement. This was an attempted takeover executed quietly enough that nobody would notice until it became legally irreversible. Noah stepped closer now, his voice still perfectly controlled. You rerouted my communications while I was overseas. Harold swallowed. Only temporarily. You isolated my wife from company authorization. For procedural reasons. Noah gave a faint nod. And you thought neither of us would return before midnight. Harold said nothing. That silence answered everything. The rain outside intensified harder against the glass tower while distant thunder rolled somewhere over the East River. Inside the lobby, the tension had become almost physical. Even Vincent Hale stood completely motionless beside the entrance doors, his face pale as realization settled deeper into his chest with every passing second. He had not simply denied entry to a wealthy resident tonight. He had unknowingly participated in an organized attempt to remove the founders of the building itself. Evelyn looked toward the dark management office again. Where is Alicia Vale? Harold hesitated. One of the attorneys opened his portfolio quickly. Mrs. Carter, after Article 7 activated, our team recovered deleted board communications from the internal server backups. Harold's face lost color instantly. Noah noticed immediately. Deleted. The attorney nodded grimly. Messages discussing executive transition plans after ownership transfer finalized. Evelyn extended her hand silently. The attorney handed her several printed pages. She scanned the first message calmly beneath the chandelier light. Then the second. Then the third. Her expression never changed, but Arthur Levinson quietly muttered beneath his breath. Dear God. Noah looked at the pages next. His jaw hardened visibly. You were planning to remove us permanently from the board. Harold stepped forward quickly. Listen to me carefully before you misunderstand those conversations. Noah looked at him with cold disbelief. You already misunderstood one thing tonight. The room held its breath. Noah's eyes shifted briefly toward Vincent standing beside the entrance. You thought quiet people were weak. Vincent lowered his gaze immediately. Harold tried one last time to regain control. Noah, the investors were nervous. Your international expansion, Evelyn's prolonged travel, declining board confidence. Evelyn interrupted him softly. The Singapore merger closed yesterday. Harold stopped speaking. Evelyn folded the printed pages neatly. You attempted a hostile transfer less than 24 hours before the company doubled its valuation. The realization hit the room instantly. Several residents stared openly now, staring at her monitor. Sir, she whispered nervously. Harold turned sharply. What? Her fingers trembled slightly above the keyboard. The board meeting. She swallowed hard. It just got moved. Noah looked toward the screen. Moved where? The receptionist's eyes lifted slowly toward Evelyn. To the lobby. Effective immediately. A deep silence rolled across Carter Heights. Then one by one, hidden television screens embedded throughout the marble lobby flickered to life simultaneously. Black screens turned bright blue. Company logos appeared. Executive access windows opened. And across every screen in the building, a single line of text appeared beneath the Carter Holdings insignia. Emergency founder session now active. All attending parties remain present. Harold Bennett stared upward in horror as residents slowly stepped back around him. For the first time in 12 years, he no longer looked like the man controlling the room. He looked like the only person who had not realized the room already belonged to someone else. The marble lobby of Carter Heights no longer felt like a residential building. It felt like a courtroom where everyone suddenly realized the verdict had already begun forming before they even understood the case, where Vincent Hale had stopped her nearly an hour earlier. Yet somehow she now seemed like the only person fully in control of the room. Noah stepped toward the concierge desk, while one of the attorneys connected a secure tablet into the building's executive system. "Initiate full board attendance verification," Noah said calmly. The receptionist nodded nervously and typed quickly. One by one, executive portraits began appearing across the television screens. Some live from home offices, some from luxury hotels, some clearly awakened from sleep overseas. Alicia Vale appeared first from a dimly lit apartment in Chicago. Her face immediately tightened when she saw Evelyn standing beside Noah in the lobby. Stephen Grayson joined seconds later from a private airport lounge in London. His expression shifted from irritation to outright panic almost instantly. Harold looked up at the screen slowly, realizing the emergency session was not private. It was fully visible throughout the entire building. Every resident could see it. Every employee connected to the system could hear it. Evelyn noticed the fear crossing his face. "You wanted control handled quietly," she said softly. "Transparency must feel uncomfortable." Harold turned toward the cameras immediately. "I object to the nature of this emergency activation. This matter concerns confidential executive restructuring." Noah did not even look at him. "You lost the right to confidentiality when you forged founder authorization." Silence hit the lobby again. On the screen, Alicia Vale visibly shifted in her chair. "Harold," she said carefully, "you told us Evelyn agreed to temporary suspension while negotiations finalized overseas." Evelyn lifted the forged document calmly into view. "Did this look like my signature to you?" Alicia stared at the page. Her face slowly drained of color. Stephen Grayson spoke next from London, his voice tense. "Harold assured us this was procedural." "Procedural?" Noah finally turned toward the screens. "You approved removing my wife from executive access without speaking to either of us directly." Stephen opened his mouth slightly, then closed it again. The lobby remained deathly still. Vincent stood near the entrance doors feeling smaller with every passing minute. Earlier that evening he believed he was enforcing building policy. Now he understood he had witnessed powerful executives manipulating perception itself. They counted on appearance, on assumptions, on silence, and for a while it almost worked. One of the attorneys suddenly handed Noah another folder. "Sir, we recovered additional internal messages." Noah scanned the documents briefly before passing them to Evelyn. Her eyes moved carefully across the pages while the screens above continued glowing blue against the marble walls. Then she stopped at one sentence. Her expression changed very slightly. Noah noticed immediately. "What is it?" Evelyn looked up slowly. "They plan to announce our voluntary retirement tomorrow morning." A visible ripple spread through the lobby. Even Arthur Levinson looked stunned now. Harold immediately stepped forward. "That was a precautionary draft announcement only." Evelyn ignored him, prepared before the vote even finalized. Noah's voice grew quieter, more dangerous. "You already planned the story before you stole the company." Harold's composure finally cracked. "The investors needed stability," he snapped suddenly. Several residents flinched at the sharpness in his voice. "You two disappeared overseas for months while the company expanded faster than leadership could manage. People were nervous. Markets were nervous." Evelyn stared at him steadily. "So you decided to become us." Harold looked toward the residents surrounding the lobby now, desperate to regain some control of perception. "I built this company too," he argued. "I protected this building, while they traveled around the world making risky expansion deals." Noah folded his hands calmly in front of him. "You were hired to manage operations." Harold's jaw tightened. "And I did." Evelyn's voice cut through the room with terrifying calm. "No. You managed optics." The silence afterward felt enormous. Evelyn stepped slowly across the marble floor toward Harold while every eye in the lobby followed her. "You know what your real mistake was?" she asked softly. Harold said nothing. Evelyn glanced briefly toward Vincent standing beside the entrance. You thought ordinary appearances meant ordinary power. Vincent lowered his eyes immediately. Evelyn continued walking slowly through the lobby. You saw simple clothes and assumed weakness. You saw distance and assumed absence. You saw silence and assumed permission. Harold tried to interrupt. Evelyn, enough of this public spectacle. She stopped directly in front of him. You made it public the moment you handed a forged eviction notice to the woman who built this tower. The room went completely silent. Rain hammered harder against the windows now while thunder rolled deep across the Manhattan skyline. Then the system speakers overhead emitted a soft tone. One final notification appeared across every screen. Founder authority restored. All unauthorized restructuring actions voided effective immediately. Harold Bennett stared upward in disbelief while residents slowly stepped farther away from him. Nobody wanted to stand beside him anymore. Not now. Not after watching the truth unfold piece by piece in front of the entire building. Noah looked toward building security near the elevators. Escort Mr. Bennett to the executive conference suite, he said calmly. His access privileges are suspended pending legal review. Harold froze completely. You cannot do this. Noah's expression never changed. Actually, he said quietly while the room watched in absolute silence, this building belongs to the people you tried to erase. Harold Bennett stood completely still as two members of building security approached him near the center of the marble lobby. Only hours earlier he had walked through Carter Heights believing he controlled every moving piece inside the tower. The board, the filings, the timing, even the narrative itself. But power built on assumptions has a dangerous weakness. It collapses the moment reality walks back through the door. The residents surrounding the lobby watched in total silence while Harold slowly loosened the tension in his jaw, trying desperately to recover some fragment of dignity before the room swallowed him whole. This is not over, he said carefully, though his voice no longer carried authority. Noah Carter looked at him calmly. No, he replied. It is just documented now. The words landed heavily across the marble floors. Harold glanced toward the television screen still displaying restored founder authority notices above the concierge desk. For the first time that night, he finally understood the true scale of his mistake. He had not simply challenged wealthy executives. He had tried to outmaneuver the two people who built the system itself. Evelyn stood quietly near the entrance while rain continued cascading beyond the glass walls behind her. Her suitcase remained untouched beside the doorway exactly where Vincent Hale had stopped her earlier that evening. That image lingered painfully now. The founder of Carter Heights standing outside her own building in the rain, while people inside debated whether she belonged there at all. Security escorted Harold slowly toward the executive conference corridor. Nobody tried to defend him. Not Alicia Vale. Not Stephen Grayson. Not even the residents who once admired his polished professionalism during holiday galas and shareholder receptions. Silence had abandoned him completely. As the conference doors closed behind Harold, the tension inside the lobby shifted for the first time all night. The danger had passed, but the weight of what everyone witnessed still hung in the air like storm clouds refusing to move on. Noah exhaled slowly and looked toward the attorneys. Freeze all restructuring activity until independent review is completed. Yes, sir. And notify investors before markets open. The legal team nodded quickly before stepping aside to coordinate emergency calls. Evelyn remained near the entrance doors for another quiet moment. Then she finally bent slightly and picked up her suitcase herself. Arthur Levinson watched her with visible disbelief. After everything tonight, he said softly, you still carry your own luggage. Evelyn gave him a faint smile. That is usually how people know they still belong to themselves. Arthur shook his head slowly, almost ashamed. I should have recognized what was happening sooner. Most people do not notice injustice until it becomes inconvenient. Evelyn answered gently. Her eyes drifted briefly across the residents surrounding the lobby. Some looked embarrassed now. Others avoided eye contact entirely. Earlier they had watched a tired woman in a beige coat being denied entry into her own home, and said nothing because it looked official. Respectability often hides behind polished language and security badges. That was the lesson settling quietly over Carter Heights tonight. Vincent Hale remained near the entrance desk, unable to move from the exact spot where the evening had begun unraveling. He looked younger now somehow. Smaller. The confidence that came with borrowed authority had disappeared completely. Finally, after several long seconds, he stepped toward Evelyn slowly. "Mrs. Carter," he said quietly. She turned toward him calmly. Vincent swallowed hard. "I owe you an apology." The lobby became silent again. Evelyn waited patiently without rescuing him from the discomfort. Vincent glanced briefly toward the rain outside before continuing. "When you arrived tonight, I saw your clothes first. Your suitcase. The fact that you were alone." His voice tightened slightly. "I thought people with real power looked different." Noah watched him carefully but said nothing. Vincent lowered his eyes. "I was wrong." Evelyn studied him for several seconds beneath the chandelier light. "No," she said softly. "You were trained to trust appearances." Vincent looked back up slowly. Evelyn continued in the same calm tone. "The dangerous part is what happens when people stop questioning who benefits from those appearances." The words settled deeply through the room. Even Noah glanced toward her quietly. Vincent nodded once, absorbing every syllable. "I understand now." Evelyn looked toward the rain-covered skyline beyond the glass walls. "Good," she said. "Because one day someone else will stand where I stood tonight." The room fell completely silent again. Then something unexpected happened. Vincent reached toward the concierge podium, opened the black velvet box carefully, and removed the deactivated penthouse key card. For a brief moment he looked at the red line burned across its surface. Then, he snapped the card cleanly in half and placed both pieces quietly into the trash beneath the desk. No dramatic speech. No performance. Just a small private acknowledgement that some mistakes should never be reused. Noah noticed first. A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth before disappearing again. Evelyn simply watched Vincent for one long second. Then she gave a small nod. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition. The private elevator doors slid open softly behind them once more. Warm golden light spilled across the marble floor while thunder rolled faintly beyond the Manhattan skyline. Noah extended one hand toward Evelyn's suitcase. This time she let him take it. Together they stepped toward the elevator while the residents of Carter Heights moved aside instinctively, creating a clear path through the silent lobby. Nobody spoke as the founders walked past. Nobody dared, because sometimes the loudest lesson arrives without shouting at all. The private elevator rose quietly through the heart of Carter Heights, while Manhattan shimmered beneath the storm outside. Inside the mirrored walls of the elevator cabin, neither Evelyn nor Noah spoke for several long seconds. The events of the night still lingered around them like echoes refusing to fade. Down below, the lobby that once felt untouchable had been transformed into something else entirely. A room full of people forced to confront how quickly appearances can rewrite truth when nobody questions them. Noah finally glanced toward Evelyn standing beside him beneath the soft golden light overhead. "You knew the moment you saw the envelope, did not you?" Evelyn rested one hand lightly against the silver railing. "I knew someone had already decided who I was before I walked through the door." Noah exhaled quietly through his nose. "Harold underestimated you." A faint smile touched Evelyn's face. "No. He underestimated silence." The elevator chimed softly as the doors opened onto the penthouse level. Warm lighting spilled across polished oak floors and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking rain-soaked Manhattan. The city stretched endlessly beneath them in glowing ribbons of white and gold, taxis moving like distant currents through the streets below. Evelyn stepped inside slowly. Home. Yet even now, after everything, there was no triumph in her expression. Only reflection. Noah placed her suitcase near the entryway, while she walked toward the massive windows facing the skyline. Far below, tiny flashes of emergency lights reflected across wet intersections. The storm was beginning to pass. "Do you regret coming back tonight?" Noah asked quietly. Evelyn looked out over the city for several seconds before answering. No, her voice remained calm. "Sometimes people reveal themselves most clearly when they think you are no longer watching." Downstairs, the lobby of Carter Heights remained unusually silent long after the founders disappeared upstairs. Residents lingered near the marble columns speaking in hushed voices, while television screens slowly returned to their normal programming. But nobody seemed interested in leaving just yet. The atmosphere had changed too much. Arthur Levinson stood near the concierge desk staring thoughtfully at the rain outside. "I have lived here 14 years," he said quietly to no one in particular. "And tonight was the first time I realized how dangerous polished people can be." Nearby, Vincent Hale remained behind the concierge podium alone. The shattered pieces of the deactivated keycard still rested inside the trash beneath the desk. He kept replaying the moment Evelyn arrived in the rain carrying her own suitcase while he blocked the door without hesitation. Not because he knew anything about her. Because he believed he already understood everything he needed to know the moment he saw her. That realization would stay with him far longer than embarrassment ever could. The following morning, news of Harold Bennett's suspension spread quietly through Manhattan business circles before the markets even opened. Carter Holdings announced the successful completion of the Singapore merger, alongside an internal review of unauthorized executive actions. Investors responded immediately. By noon, company valuation reached its highest level in firm history. Yet inside Carter Heights, people talked less about the merger than the image they could not forget. A woman standing outside her own building in the rain while everyone inside watched and assumed the doorman must be right. 3 days later, Vincent arrived early for his evening shift and found a small envelope waiting on the concierge desk addressed simply to him. No logo. No signature on the outside. He opened it carefully beneath the soft lobby lights. Inside was a handwritten note on cream stationery. "Authority means very little without judgment. Thank you for learning the difference. Evelyn Carter." Vincent stared at the note for a long moment while the lobby remained quiet around him. Then he folded it carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket instead of throwing it away. Above him, the towering glass walls of Carter Heights reflected the late afternoon sunlight now replacing the storm from earlier that week. Residents moved through the lobby differently after that night. More observant. More careful. People held doors open longer. Conversations softened around employees whose names they had never bothered learning before. Small things. Quiet things. But meaningful ones. Because sometimes dignity does not return through revenge or humiliation. Sometimes it arrives through recognition. Through the uncomfortable realization that the person standing quietly in front of you may carry more strength, wisdom, and ownership than appearances could ever reveal. And that week, inside one of Manhattan's most exclusive towers, an entire building learned what happens when silence finally walks back through the front door.